Back in September 2019, I ended up chatting with a girl through the comments on a Facebook post. She was really stunning and seemed pretty chill, so after a few weeks of messaging back and forth, I decided to drive all the way from White Plains to Pittsburgh just to meet up for a weekend. I remember a buddy asking me, "Have you talked to her enough on the phone?" I told him we'd spoken some, but mostly just exchanged texts and messages on Facebook. He warned me that we should really have a long conversation about all sorts of things, or I might get a nasty surprise later on. Looking back, he was right. I won't bore you with all the minor details, but let's just say, me and this girl didn't turn out to be as compatible as I'd hoped. Originally, I'd planned to stay the whole weekend, grab some food with her, maybe catch a movie, but near the end of it, I decided to cut my losses and head back to New York that Saturday night. I figured if I hit the road around 7 p.m., I'd be home by 1 in the morning. I knew I'd be wiped out when I got home, but not so exhausted that I'd risk an accident. So after grabbing a quick bite, I was in my car and leaving White Plains by 7:30. 3 hours into the drive, with the setting sun fading, I saw a sign for Rosecrans in Pennsylvania. It had been dark for about 30 or 40 minutes, and I remember passing a lit-up gas station on my left Senko. I think in just a mile or two further, my fuel gauge suddenly lit up with that dreaded low warning. Seems like it's always my luck. It never signals when I'm approaching a gas station, only when I'm just about out of fuel and the station's fallen behind me. I was driving on one of those divided highways, with a strip of small parks or trees between the two sides. That meant no chance to turn around for miles. I asked Siri, "Where's the next gas station?" And she told me there was one about 20-30 minutes ahead on US 15. I wasn't about to run out of gas and get stranded, so I figured I'd better push forward. Looking ahead, I didn't see any other cars behind me or in front, so I felt pretty safe enough to check my phone and make sure I was heading the right way for that turn. I swear I only looked for 2 seconds at most. When I looked back at the road, there she wasted ahead, walking right into my path. I slammed on the brakes so hard I almost got whiplash, but I managed to keep control. The girl, who was faintly visible at first, was now just 5 feet in front of my headlights. My initial instinct was to yell, "Are you effing crazy?" at her, but then I quickly realized why she was walking in the middle of the road. She looked absolutely terrible, clothes torn apart, blood in her hair from what looked like a head wound, and she wasn't wearing any shoes either. When my car finally stopped, she staggered over to the passenger side and tried to open the door. I keep my car locked out of habit, so her first attempt only made a horrible scraping sound. Then she let out a blood-curdling scream, "Open the door. Please, I'm begging you," which just amped up my confusion. I instinctively spun around in my seat, ready for whatever or whoever was behind her. I wasn't going to get out right away, because it seemed like some kind of trap. Using a scared, hurt girl as bait could be a deadly move. But when I looked around, seeing no one, and her voice and blood convinced me to believe she was genuinely afraid, I finally unlocked the door, and she practically threw herself into the back seat, slamming the door behind her. As I drove off again, she blurted out, "Mister, we gotta move. We're not going fast enough. They're gonna catch us." I pressed the gas and asked who they were. She said she didn't know, just that they had taken her. That's when I noticed the handcuffs on her left wrist, one still locked, the other just dangling. I didn't need much more information. I just floored it and sped for a few miles, trying to put distance between us. I kept checking the rear view, and as long as I didn't see any headlights, I slowed down from about 70 to a cautious 35 mph. But as we slowed, she started yelling, "Why are you slowing down?" And before I could even answer, she snapped, "Go faster. They're gonna follow me." I was freaking out inside, but told her there was no sign of anyone. I mentioned we'd be in trouble if a cop spotted us doing over 60, but she shot back, "You don't get it. We want the cops. If those guys catch me, they'll kill you too." Honestly, I believed her. If they were willing to cuff her and then try to bash her head in, I wouldn't doubt they'd shoot me to get her back. Hearing about the cops was kind of a relief then, because I was worried I might be harboring some runaway fugitive without realizing it. But it wasn't the police she was running from. I sped up a little more, pushing past 60, staying within the legal limit but making good time. I kept my eyes on the mirrors, expecting a pair of headlights to pop up. But then I remembered my tank was close to empty. I told her we'd have to stop for gas at the next town, which didn't sit well with Hirsch kept insisting I was lying, that the hero driver was in the red zone. She started screaming curse words in my passenger seat, panicked, until I managed to calm her down. I revved up the speed again, told her to call the police and tell them to meet us at the station I was about to pull into. She grabbed my phone from the dashboard and dialed 911. I listened as she explained she'd been kidnapped, taken into the woods, and then she broke free from handcuffs she'd been chained to a pipe. She said she didn't know much, probably questions about who the kidnappers were or where she was exactly. She'd been held for a couple of days by that point, and the things she described, the disgusting, evil stuff these monsters did to her, made my skin crawl just listening. The speed gauge in my car crept up to 75, just trying to get us away from those sick people. It's no coincidence that right then I kept thinking, they look like monsters, those guys chasing her, the ones who'd done this to her. We sped all the way to that town, seeing no sign of cops, but when we got to the gas station, no one was there. She instantly flipped out again. Where are they? They said they'd be here. I told her they were probably on their way, but she kept panicking, staring at every passing car like it was her pursuer. Then a car pulled in, a nice four-door sedan, and stopped at a pump behind me. Out jumped three guys, all in their 40s or 50s, ordinary looking, just casually looking around as if they were searching for something or someone. I kept one eye on my pump, the other on those guys, thinking, what the hell are they up to? Suddenly, the oldest of the three asked, "Hey, have you seen a little lady walking around here?" Knowing I probably wouldn't fool him with a simple no, I just nodded and lied about what I'd seen. I told them I'd seen some crazy-looking woman in the middle of the highway trying to flag me down, so I kept my door locked and sped off. I kept my eyes averted from theirs and asked, "Why, what's this about? Did she escape from an orphanage or something?" They just chuckled. I figured I'd played my part. But then the older guy kept looking around, and his two friends moved closer, peering at my car, the other scanning the area where she'd run. Then he suddenly asked, "Did you call 911? I said I had lead a little more, saying I made the call because I was worried someone might get hurt on the highway. I didn't mention we were supposed to meet police at this gas station. I just said I called because I was scared she'd end up dead or I'd get blamed for something." Honestly, I was trying to look convincing, and maybe I pulled it off because those other two guys weren't moved at all. One of them even started peering into my car windows, looking for that girl or signs she'd been there. I was scared stiff, praying she hadn't left any evidence behind, like a scrunchie or her clothes. I also worried that my phone on the dash had blood or dirt on it from her, and I'd hate for those guys to see it. Thankfully, I felt the phone's weight in my pocket a relief. I had to do something, so I asked the guy peering in my car, "Hey, what are you doing?" Looking for something. He hesitated, then backed off, giving a small, nervous smile. The older guy said, "Don't mind him. He's just curious," in a way that felt really ominous. They then made their excuses and left. While I was paying for my gas, those three guys kept walking around, less hurried than before but still clearly looking for her. I wandered inside the store, pretending I was just indecisive about snacks. A few minutes later, they got back in their car and took off. I grabbed a coffee, ate some protein bars, and told the clerk my story, stressing how unsettling this was. Like those guys knew exactly where she was and might have been tracking her. Maybe it sounded paranoid, but the more I thought about it, the more it seemed possible. Eventually, about 20 minutes later than I'd hoped, the police arrived. I told them everything, how I picked her up, what those men looked like, and how terrifying the whole thing was. They mentioned that her being tracked with a device wasn't out of the question, probably the handcuffs she'd been chained with. One of the officers thanked me for calling it in and said that, while it was obviously a stressful ordeal, calling the cops was the right move. They had footage from the gas station showing those men's faces and license plates, which was a good lead. Honestly, I felt proud, like I had helped catch some terrible people. But I also kept thinking about her, wondering if she ever got free of theme, if she's safe now, or if she's still living in fear. Maybe she's found peace with a good man, or maybe she's never really escaped. Some days I tell myself she got away, maybe raising a family far from all that darkness. But other days, I get this sinking feeling like they got to her, like they silenced her for good. My name's Nick, by the way, and I'm from England. Then there's a story from my own experience when I was in Italy with my family back in the late 80s. We went on a holiday to Tuscany, to a beautiful villa high in the hills above a place called Lusignano. It looked like a little piece of paradise and was dirt cheap compared to other places. We booked it for 2 weeks, and I couldn't wait. We landed at Pisa in the late afternoon. My son Harry hated the flight, but he loved the ice cream we bought him before heading out to the villa. It was about a 3-hour drive from Pisa, and as we got closer, it got dark. The countryside was so quiet and the stars lit up the sky. Harry passed out looking at them, and my wife looked exhausted too. When we reached a crossroads, I stopped, took out the map, and double-checked our route. I told her we were just a few miles away and soon would be at the villa. I drove up a steep hill that leveled off at the top, trying to go slowly to avoid surprises. But just as I crested the hill, a figure jumped out from the bushes, lit up by our headlights, an older man holding a long double-barreled shotgun. He pointed it directly at us. I hit the brakes, panic setting in, and as I struggled to reverse, I suddenly heard a shout. Another man came out of the bushes, telling the first guy no and lowering the shotgun. They both looked terrified. They realized we weren't who they thought we were. The second man approached my window, tapped on it, and in broken Italian said, "Michimoto si," which I knew meant, "I'm very sorry, sir." I didn't speak much Italian, and hearing that, I just asked, "Parlami in Inglese? Do you speak English?" He shook his head and said no in that melodic Italian way and told us to move along. I remember my wife asking, "Are they police?" And the man replied, "Si, police," still smiling. Then he told us avanti, which means come on, go. Harry woke up and started asking Mommy, Daddy, "Who are these men?" We told him they were police, but I didn't quite trust that. She pretended everything was fine and reassured him, but I knew better. Those men didn't look like cops, no uniforms, no badges, just a couple of guys with a shotgun. Once we reached the villa, it looked even better in real life than in the brochure. After tucking Harry in, I told my wife what I suspected, that they weren't police. The shotgun looked like it was from a farm, and they hadn't even tried to show us any ID. I said they're probably the mafia. She was silent, listening as I explained, and it started to click for her. A couple of mafia guys had been waiting to ambush someone, and they figured it was us. But we figured maybe because we were a few miles away from where they'd set up their trap, we'd slip through. She suggested calling the police, hoping they might have someone who spoke English. But I hesitated. I figured if we got involved, it might just bring more trouble. Drawing attention to ourselves in a strange country isn't wise. So, we decided just to stay quiet, stick to our plan, and not say anything that might tip them off. Next day, we went to a nearby town called Lusignano and found a cozy little place that served paninis, espresso, and pastries. I ordered a coffee while my wife and Harry played on the table football in the corner. The bartender spoke English, so we chatted. While we were there, a group of older guys at another table started gesturing toward the TV. The bartender turned it on. A news report was playing. I asked what it was about, and he said, "There's been a murder nearby. A businessman got killed. Terrible." I asked exactly how close, and after consulting some locals, he confirmed it was around the same spot where those armed guys had almost shot us. I didn't tell my wife right then. I didn't want to scare her more. But later at dinner, I told her about the murder. Again, there wasn't much we could do, so we just enjoyed the amazing food instead. Harry ate everything, happy to try new stuff. When it came time to pay, the owner and the waiter told us our bill had already been paid. We were confused, thinking maybe some misunderstanding. But they insisted it was a gift by someone we'd had a misunderstanding with. We couldn't quite connect the dots, so we paid, grateful but feeling uneasy. We went to another restaurant the next night, same story, no charge. Eventually, we realized it was the mafia. Maybe they'd paid for our meals to look after us or keep an eye on us. It was a strange feeling, knowing someone was footing our bill like a covert protection thing. We made sure to visit other places too, just to be safe. But the mafia guys never contacted us again, and we never saw those armed men again either. Maybe they saw us, or maybe we just missed them. It was a wild holiday, intense but unforgettable. When we went back later to a different part of Italy, we had no more encounters. We paid for everything ourselves, and it was more relaxing, even if our wallets complained. Now I live in Chicago and was working the midnight shift, that 12 to 10 gig, 6 days a week. I'd often get out around 10:30 p.m., dragging myself home, hating every minute of it. The streets at night weren't exactly safe. Crazy folks in need of trouble, looters outside the liquor store, or some joker jumping out of dumpsters trying to mug me. I got pretty used to it, but some nights were worse. One night it started off slow. I'd done my routine stops, liquor store, late night shop, quiet as hell. I thought maybe I'd dodge the night's usual trouble, but then things turned really nuts. A little after midnight, I was behind two cars in traffic when one tried to pass the other. There was honking, and someone stuck a hand out and flipped someone off. No actual passing, just frustration. When we hit the next set of lights, they were side by side, dead ahead of me. I thought if anything was going to happen, it would now. Sure enough, the guy in the front car opened his door, got out, and went to confront the other driver, slamming his fist on the window and shouting, "Get out and say that to my face." But the passenger's door wouldn't open. I thought, oh, these guys don't want trouble. They didn't roll down their windows. They probably planned to speed off once the light turned green, thinking I was just a fool. But in the end, it was the other way around. The guy who got out clearly didn't realize who he was messing with. The light turned green and both cars started moving, but behind me, the cars caught up and honked, yelling for them to get back in line. That guy who'd been yelling told everyone to shut up, which made me laugh a little. Everyone's just trying to get somewhere, and he's stopping traffic for his temper. Then, as I watched, the passenger window he'd been pounding on surprisingly started lowering halfway. I think he heard something from inside the car, because just then I saw two flashes and heard two loud pops. It was definitely gunshots. I knew immediately those were gunshots. Then the car that fired sped off at a crazy speed, probably 80 or 90 mph. Initially, I thought they missed because the guy who was targeted didn't react, just kind of watched the car's departure. But then he started walking back to his own vehicle, and I saw that one of the bullets had hit him probably around his eye and tore away a huge chunk of his face and skull. Blood was pouring out, and he was staggering totally out of it. He raised his hand to his head, saw the blood, and kept walking with blood and brains dripping. I swear if it had been me, I'd have been losing my mind. But he just kept going, then suddenly fell to his knees and then onto his hands. He reached for his door, fingers clutching as if he was trying to open it for support, but it was at least a foot away, and he couldn't tell. He passed out, reaching for something he'd never grab. I heard someone honking behind me, shouting at me to move, but after the gunfire, chaos erupted. Everyone was trying to get out of there, racing left and right, not knowing if the shooter was still out there. I froze, just stared at that bloody mess on the street, at the torn flesh and exposed bone, the blood pouring from his head, probably the worst thing I've ever seen. I couldn't look away. I called 911, and some people from the sidewalk came to check on the guy. We all saw how badly hurt he was. EMTs probably didn't even get there before he died. I told the cops everything I saw, but I couldn't give them the shooter's license plate. Just the car and that it had been in the passenger seat. And after I finished, they let me go. But the nightmare stayed with me. Spent days having terrible dreams about that guy's mutilated face. I didn't realize how much it was messing with me until I got sick. I couldn't sleep. I lost my appetite, and I isolated myself. Eventually, a girl I knew suggested therapy, and I gave it a shot. It didn't work overnight, but it helped me process what happened, piece by piece, and get back to normal, or at least closer to it. Now, I get it. Some things stick with you forever, like that night in Chicago. And though I'd love to think the wounded man pulled through, a part of me wonders if he didn't. Maybe those gunmen got to him, shut him up for good. My name's Mike, and I'm from Chicago.